Hi there, and welcome to the Daily Gardener, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's February 12th, and there are just 36 days until the first day of spring. Woohoo! Today we celebrate the man who discovered the queen bee had ovaries, and he also said that the head of the colony was not a king, but a queen. And we'll also learn about the family behind the ubiquitous Jackman clematis. It's the one with the large, dark purple flowers with yellow centers. And we'll hear words from Florida's pioneer naturalist, Charles Torrey Simpson. And we grow that garden library today with a magnificent book about desert gardens. This is one of the best. And then we'll wrap things up with the sweet story of a gardener poet who made one of the first romantic gardens. But before we get to all of that, I want to take a second and thank those of you who have left reviews for the show over on podchaser.com. Podchaser is a podcast directory, and it really does help people find the podcasts that they're looking for. So Janet recently posted about the Daily Gardener, and she wrote, "Amazing information for a gardener. I cherish the time listening to Jennifer and look at my garden with new eyes and energy. I highly recommend it to all my garden friends." And Connie Cottingham from Love Notes from the Garden, that's her wonderful blog, wrote, "My new can't miss podcast, The Daily Gardener, packs so much in to about 20 minutes. It's perfect for starting my weekday mornings. And my favorite part is when Jennifer combines history and gardening. It's like sitting down with a dear friend who has spent the day reading and researching and can't wait to tell you all of the best parts. Jennifer is even more of a book addict than I, enthusiastic about a wide range of topics, and she crafts book reviews that are irresistible. I have listened to 5 podcasts and bought 2 books, and I fear my floor joists will not be able to handle this." I love that. Well, Connie, I have to say, too, that you are completely spot on, because I do spend many days reading and researching and writing about botanical history and literature so that I can share it on the show. And then finally, there was a great review from Marty Davis, who writes, "I welcome the podcast every weekday. It's a bright, brief daily overview of garden highlights that includes brief biographies of influential garden authors, designers, and practitioners. I love hearing events that have happened on this date, and the entire podcast helps me feel connected to the gardening concept and community. What a daily gift." Well, what a gift to me and the show, Marty and Connie and Janet. Thank all of you for leaving a review for the show on Podchaser. I really and truly appreciate it. And if you have time in your day this weekend or next week to leave a review for the show, I would truly appreciate it. And I would happily give you a shout out on a future podcast and also in the Facebook group for the show. All right. Now, before I forget, I also want to tell you about thedailygardener.org. This is the website for the show. You can find it over at thedailygardener.org. And while you're there, you can do a couple of things. First, you can go through all of the show notes that have been created for every episode of the show. And we have well over 300 episodes by now, so that's fantastic. And in addition to that, there are botanical profiles there that you can go through. So you can see all of that botanical history. It's very nicely arranged. In addition to the posts that have been shared in Unearthed Words, whether you're looking for botanical poetry for a topic or a journal entry, so forth. And then finally, there are the Botanic Sparks, as well as other anecdotal blogs that have been written for the show. And don't forget that while you're there, you can sign up for the free Daily Gardener Friday newsletter. It comes out every Friday, so there's one coming out today, and it's basically like getting a little garden letter from me to you. I give you a little extra botanical history and some literature to tide you over the weekend, in addition to some reminders and what's going on in my garden, as well as garden gift ideas and so forth. So go ahead and check all of that out. You can find it over at thedailygardener.org. Now, don't forget, if you have some gardener greetings that you want me to announce on the show, I'm happy to do that for you. So go ahead and send me any garden pictures, stories, birthday wishes, and so forth to my email. You can email me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. Here's today's curated news. Today's news was shared in the Hartley magazine, and it was written by Mary Kate Mackey. And the title of the post is called The Organization Challenge: Small Steps Bring Big Rewards. Now, of course, what caught my attention here is that Mary is showing a very organized interior of her garden shed. And of course, those after pictures are so inspiring, especially this time of year. I don't know about you, but all season, especially when the snow starts, we start to find things that are in the house or in the garage or in other parts of the property. And we realize that they should have made it into the garden shed. And so invariably what happens is, over the months, especially during the holidays, we just start chucking stuff into the garden shed. And before long, it just becomes an unmitigated disaster. It's a hot mess. And so this post by Mary Kate was so inspiring to me because it's exactly what is called for, not only in my shed, but probably in many sheds as well. So Mary Kate was very thoughtful in this post. She talks about how to tackle the garden shed. If you've always wanted a garden shed that is not only functional, but also beautiful, Mary Kate is going to walk you through how to make that happen. First, she advises chunking your contents of your shed. So sorting it out by function. And then after you have the areas of your shed chunked together, you can begin to tackle each one of those sorted areas one at a time. And this is great if you don't have an entire day to devote to this project. So again, Mary Kate talks about sorting things by their use. And in her case, she sorted by weeding, followed by digging, and then by watering, which I thought was great. She even put things together under the heading of things that cut, whether she's talking about loppers or sickles or clippers and that kind of thing. And then she advises to weed out the excess if you have duplicates of things, take care of the chemicals if you have chemicals in your shed that you're no longer using, and then, of course, decide on storage solutions. Now, my little trick here is to bring a little notebook out with you so that you can look around the shed and figure out just how many hooks or S-hooks or types of holders or containers that you need so that you can be more deliberate and organized in your storage. And then last but not least, Mary Kate advises adding fun to your shed. So once the heavy-duty organizing is all over, you can think about incorporating things like artwork or basket collection or some other type of collection, antique tools, and so forth. So very fun. But if you'd like to just spend some time looking at Mary Kate's post and being inspired by that, that is fine as well. Because I know for myself, especially up here in Minnesota, that we are nowhere near done with winter. And there is absolutely no way I'm going out to my shed until the snow melts. So I probably have at least another month before I'll be cleaning out my shed in earnest. But hats off to the award-winning writer and speaker, Mary Kate Mackey, for her fun post on organizing the garden shed. Now, if you'd like to read Mary Kate's post for yourself, it's very easy to do. In the Facebook group for the show, just search for the word organization, and Mary Kate's post will pop right up. And if you're not in the Facebook group for the show, it's so easy to join. It's really no sweat. All you need to do the next time you're on Facebook is search for the words Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend and then request to join. I'd love to meet you in the group. Here's today's brevities. Today is the birthday of the Dutch biologist and entomologist Jan Swammerdam, who was born on this day, February 12th, in 1637. Before Jan's work, people believed that insects were created spontaneously. But Jan proved that insects were born from eggs laid by the female species, and that the larva, pupa, and adult were just different forms of the same species. After Jan dissected a female bee and discovered it had ovaries, he pronounced the head of the colony to be a queen bee, quote, hitherto looked upon like a king. And here was Jan's description of the male bees. I thought you'd find this very interesting. The hive tolerates, during the summer days of abundance, the embarrassing presence of 300 or 400 males, from whose ranks the queen, about to be born, shall select her lover. 300 or 400 foolish, clumsy, useless, noisy creatures who are pretentious, gluttonous, dirty, coarse, totally and scandalously idle, insatiable, and enormous. And Jan's description of the hive's survival abilities is still as vibrant and relevant today as it was when he wrote, "Should disaster befall the little republic, should the hive or the comb collapse, should man prove ignorant or brutal, should they suffer from famine, from cold or disease, and perish by thousands, it will still be almost invariably found that the queen will be safe and alive beneath the corpses of her faithful daughters. For they will protect her and help her escape. Their bodies will provide both rampart and shelter. For her will be the last drop of honey, the wholesomest food. Break their comb 20 times in succession. Take 20 times from them their young and their food. You still shall never succeed in making them doubt of the future." And today is the anniversary of the death of the English nurseryman, pomologist, florist, and clematis hybridizer George Jackman, who died on this day, February 12th, in 1869. He was just 68 years old. Now, today I thought you'd enjoy learning about the Jackman family, because that really is the story of George Jackman. And of course, this is the family behind the ubiquitous Jackman clematis. It's the one with the large, dark purple flowers with yellow centers. And just an FYI, you can prune the Jackman back in the fall without hurting next year's bloom. So don't sweat it. You can't hurt it with an end of the season cleanup. Now, with multiple Georges in the family, this George Jackman that we're talking about today was always referred to as George the First or George I. Now, George I and his brother Henry were born into a nurseryman's family. In 1810, their father, William, founded Jackman Nursery on 150 acres in Woking, Surrey. George I and Henry grew up learning the business alongside their dad, and by 1830, William had turned the business over to his sons. After a few years, Henry decided he wasn't interested in running the struggling nursery, and he left it for George I. In the fall of 1834, George married Mary Ann Fremont. He was 33 years old, and in a little over 3 years, George II was born. The beginning of the year 1840 was a terrible time for George I. He lost his wife Mary in January and his father William in February. In the span of 25 days, George I and his 3-year-old son, George II, were alone. Needless to say, the nursery became the center of their world. Now, the start of clematis hybridizing began in 1835, about 35 miles from the Jackman nursery. The site was London's Pineapple Nursery, run by John Andrew Henderson, and he was the very first person to create a clematis hybrid. John called his creation the Clematis hendersonii, and there's no doubt that George I took notice. When George II was 13 years old, the great plant explorer Robert Fortune brought the Clematis lanuginosa to England. Native to China, the blooms on this clematis were larger than any ever seen before. If clematis blossoms were going to get bigger, the lanuginosa was the linchpin. By this point, George I was employing 35 men and 6 boys at the Jackman nursery. George II shadowed every aspect of the business, and he grew to be a shrewd owner-operator. As a young man, George II was energized at the thought of clematis hybridizing, and when he was just 21 years old, George II crossed Fortune's lanuginosa with hendersonii, along with the climber atrorubens. In less than 6 months, the Jackmans had 300 seedlings, and George Jackman II had an instant hit on his hands. The plant was hardy. It quickly produced long-lasting, impressive flowers, and the rootstock lasted for many years. The year was 1858, and the Clematis Jackmanii was born. And from George II's notebook, we see that he wrote, "Seedlings, about 300, results of hybrids, very robust growers, abundant in flower of rich dark purple and maroon." Clematis Jackmanii went on to receive the Award of Garden Merit from the Royal Horticultural Society, and George II co-authored a book with Thomas More, the secretary of the RHS, and the book was called Clematis as a Garden Flower. George II and Thomas More dedicated the book to Her Royal Highness Princess Mary, the Duchess of Teck. The clematis was one of her favorite flowers. When George I died on this day in 1869, he had raised his son and had turned his nursery into a success. He had served as chapel warden for his church, the Church of St. John, for over 2 decades. He had started serving a few years after losing his wife Mary, Mrs. George Jackman. The Gardener's Chronicle said he died after a gout attack and was, by all accounts, a, quote, beloved, kind-hearted, genial Christian. And it went on to say that his, quote, workmen, several of whom who had been with him for 20, 30, or 40 years, followed his coffin to the churchyard for burial. And in 1967, the Jackman nursery was sold by a Jackman descendant, Roland Jackman. In Unearthed Words, today's words come from the author Elizabeth Ogren Rothra from her book, Florida's Pioneer Naturalist, The Life of Charles Torrey Simpson. Here's an excerpt. Simpson, a light sleeper, often dozed during the day and was too alert for sleep at bedtime. On these occasions, when the balmy, humid air equaled body temperature, he would give his household fair warning and stroll nude in his garden. He relished the moonlight, glimpsed through a vista to the bay, or brushing with silver the feathery leaves of bamboo and palms. And he once wrote, "To walk in one garden at night is to discover a new world. The trees are larger, their forms have changed, and their well-known branches are shapeless blots against the sky. Unexpected noises startle and almost terrify one. The daybirds have gone to rest, and a new and different set has taken their place, as if nature were working her employees in shifts." It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Desert Gardens of Steve Martino by Carolyn Iglesias. This book came out in 2018, and in this book, we get a tour of 21 gardens by Steve Martino. Steve's gardens are works of art that incorporate color, native plants, plants with dramatic shapes, and man-made elements in contrast with the backdrop of the desert. Steve has evolved his signature garden style to include native plants, and he's allowed his love of the desert to guide his approach. Over and over again, Steve Martino contrasts man-made pieces with the untamed desert. Steve explains, gardens consist of two worlds, the man-made and the natural one. I've described my design style as weeds and walls, nature and man. I use native plants to make the transition from a building to the adjacent natural desert. And the New York Times book review of this book said, part of Martino's trick is setting plants that have few flowers but fabulous shapes against geometric slabs of deeply colored walls. The crimson hues in a phoenix garden must be as much of a draw for the hummingbirds as the mirrored surface of the water trough. Blue concrete pyramids, magenta poles, yellow awnings, and fiberglass panels. These are all elements in Martino's playful, imaginative designs. This book is 240 pages of Steve Martino's inspiring work, a treasure of vivid color, plants, design, and custom structures. You can get a copy of Desert Gardens of Steve Martino by Karen Iglesias and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $68. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. Today is the birthday of the poet and gardener William Mason, who was born on this day, February 12th in 1724. The Reverend William Mason was also a writer, an artist, and a garden designer. And today we remember William for creating the romance of the country house garden. And here's how he did it. In 1775, at Newnham, near Oxford, England, William designed a flower garden for his friend Lord Harcourt. This garden was a turning point to many and marked the beginning of what came to be known as romantic flower gardening. Now, what William accomplished was a radical change. Straight lines and borders and beds were out. Circular beds were in. With new elements in gardens like island beds, the plants were located away from the house. Instead, plantings and beds were situated near outdoor garden buildings like temples, orangeries, or a seating area. And the garden at Newnham became a model for others. William's creation set the trend for English gardening, and William broadcast his ideas about romantic gardening in a very, very, very long poem called The English Garden. It was released in chunks over a span of a decade between 1772 and 1781. William's target audience was the wealthy garden owners of his time. He was speaking directly to them when he wrote, "Waste is not grandeur," and "A garden is the purest of human pleasures. It is the greatest refreshment to the spirit of man." William made many appeals to country estate owners, but his overall message was to throw out formal gardens in favor of romantic landscapes. Now, the word romantic simply means a landscape that is wild or natural. And during this time, people referred to these romantic, natural, or wild landscapes as the picturesque garden. Today, gardeners delight in this little verse from William's poem, and it offers simple, resonant advice from William Mason to you. Here's what he wrote. "Take thy plastic spade, it is thy pencil. Take thy seeds, thy plants, they are thy colors." Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. Hey, thanks for spending another week with The Daily Gardener. If you worry you'll miss your daily dose of botanical brevities, just head on over to thedailygardener.org. That's where you can find all the stories and books that I share on the show. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. It has lots of goodies in it, and I try to make the newsletter like you're getting a marvelous letter from a garden friend. You can always find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media. You can follow the show on Twitter, where I'm at Gardener Podcast, and you have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for listeners of the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. Last but not least, if you haven't already done so, go ahead and leave a review for the show over at Podchaser. I so appreciate reviews. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Maple Grove in Wyoming, Minnesota, with the help of Paige Mance, Brooke Bierbaum, and Eric Begay. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you on Monday.